Earlier in the week, we made a video talking about the Detroit Red Wings and one St. Louis Blues defenseman, Justin Faulk. In fact, it's been kind of funny, the fact that we keep on bringing up the Red Wings and the Blues. We had this conversation a few days ago as well, Jonathan Berggren. Turns out he's struggling with St. Louis as well, although, hey, maybe it's the wrong time to say that since he did score the game winner yesterday against Montreal. But anyways, Justin Faulk was a trade target for Detroit, courtesy of Max Bultman. He wrote about in an article that the Wings, they could use some support on their D-core, and Justin Faulk could be a reasonable bet to make. However, what I wanted to do was refer to January 2nd's edition of Spectre's Hockey to dive into some other Detroit Red Wings defenseman trade targets. We're going to leave a link in the description of this article by Lyle Richardson, January 2nd, 2026. It, of course, is a Spectre's Hockey piece, so it goes over a whole bunch of different ideas and news from around the NHL and different beats. There's some commentary on The Athletic in regards to the Minnesota Wild, and then if you scroll down over here, you'll see this. It's a link to an Athletic article written by Max Bultman that talks about the Wings' biggest trade deadline need, and how it's coming into view at mid-season. The Athletic is paid for material, Spectre's Hockey is not, but on the newest Athletic piece, Max Bultman believes the Red Wings must bolster their defense before the March 6 trade deadline. They have a strong first pairing with Mo Seider and Edvinsson. Meanwhile, Ben Sherratt has played well this season on the second pair alongside rookie ASP. However, Sandin Pellikka has been playing somewhat sheltered minutes. He might not be up to the task of being a second-pair D-man in postseason action when the play becomes more physical. Bultman suggested adding an experienced number 4 or number 5 D-man before the deadline. Possibilities could include Justin Faulk of the Blues, Connor Murphy of the Chicago Blackhawks, and Brett Kulak of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Rasmus Andersson of the Calgary Flames is the biggest name for D-men in the trade market. However, the Wings aren't likely to get into a bidding war for an expensive postseason rental player. Now, before we dive into each of these names, let's read Spectre's note at the bottom here. The Red Wings are currently flying high in the standings, sitting first in the Eastern Conference. GM Steve Yzerman isn't under any pressure right now to make a move, but he could go shopping for a blue liner by the deadline. Yzerman caught flack from Detroit's fans, pundits, and Red Wings captain Dylan Larkin for his inactivity at last season's trade deadline. It's doubtful he'll sit on his hands this season. So, there you go. ASP, second pairing guy, but the question is he going to be a second pairing guy when the going gets tough in the Stanley Cup Playoffs? I do think it's very reasonable to assume that yeah, this Red Wings team is going to be that good. I mean, you take a look at the NHL standings at the time of recording this audio. Yeah, okay, they got passed by the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they are still second in the Eastern Conference, 1 point ahead of Carolina, 2 ahead of Montreal and everybody else. And if you take a look at Axel Sandin Pellikka, yes, it's true, he is not the biggest guy in the world, 6 feet, 185, more so of a slick and skilled defenseman rather than a big brute like a Ben Sherratt can be, which is why Max Bultman wrote about a whole bunch of these names. Justin Faulk, I think, is the big one, especially when you consider his production this season, but then you also have some others. Brett Kulak is a former Oiler turned Penguin who was sent over in the Stuart Skinner trade. 6'2", 192, a left-handed guy. I would confidently say that Brett Kulak has what it takes to be a middle to bottom pairing defenseman in a Stanley Cup playoff run. Because he's literally been that the past 2 years. You don't stick around on the Edmonton Oilers making second, third round appearances, finals appearances over and over again if you're a bum. And Kulak, for the most part, was a very stable, reliable part of those decors. And also, as a Canadiens fan, I can look at Kulak and say, yeah, thank you for existing, my friend, because Brett Kulak was traded from Montreal to Edmonton for the second-round pick that was used to select Lane Hutson. So there's a very good connection there. Kulak is never going to be Hudson, but what he is a 31-year-old, stable, reliable bottom pair D. Yes, the point production has not been there this season. He had 2 points in 31 Oilers games and 2 points in 9 Penguins games, whereas last year he had 25 points in 82 games played. But really, points are just a bonus when it comes to a guy like Brett Kulak. You are looking at his game because you value everything else, not just however many goals and assists he's able to score, which, spoiler alert, even in the playoffs the previous few years, it was never really a super high amount. So you can disregard the points, you can just rely on Kulak's stability and solid defensive play. That's the value that he provides, and honestly, because he was traded for a second from Montreal to Edmonton, that value might be a little bit higher nowadays when you consider the fact that he now has all these playoff runs under his belt. I mean, he did have 2 pretty decent runs with Montreal as well, 2021 and 2020. So maybe there is a lot more value in Brett Kulak than I'm giving him credit for. I mean, yeah, all these playoff games, 98 playoff games, definitely does not scream inexperienced. So maybe Kulak is a little bit more valuable than I'm giving him credit for. Connor Murphy is a guy who has always been a pretty good fantasy hockey option because he blocks a hell of a lot of shots. He's 6'4", 212, a big guy, and he's right-handed. He was a very consistent 10-plus point scorer in the NHL for years between Arizona and Chicago. This season, he is on pace for 12 points in 82 games played. But there is so much value in the physicality, the brute force that Connor Murphy can provide. Honestly, when I think of Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Ben Sherratt on a pairing together, I'm like, okay, that's fine. ASP is a nice, versatile puck mover. But if you have Connor Murphy with Ben Sherratt, oh boy. You talk about this pairing being a twin tower pairing. How about the second one? It could be a twin tower pairing, if that makes sense. You will legitimately be replicating the Montreal Canadiens 2021 Stanley Cup finalist top 4 decor. With Weber, Petrie, Sherratt, and Edmondson, all these big dudes going out there and just leveling guys and blocking shots. Connor Murphy can do exactly that. I would say there's a lot of value in this kind of a presence, but then again, I wonder if Chicago would be intrigued in keeping him around. His contract expires at the end of the year, and honestly, he's making a lot of money, $4.4 million. But this is one of these guys where I could honestly think to myself, maybe Chicago sees him as a leader, a valuable piece, a guy that's worth keeping around for this retool that they're doing. Either that or they just trade him away for a second. Who really knows? And then you go over onto the last name here, Rasmus Andersson. We have made a bunch of videos about Andersson in the past. He is bigger than ASP, 6'1", 203, and he's also right-handed. But Axel Sandin-Pellikka is not Rasmus Andersson yet. Andersson has had multiple 40-plus point seasons in the NHL. He had a 50-point season a few years ago. He has been one of the best defensemen in Calgary the past few years, and he just made the Olympic Games. Andersson is a complete other level above these guys, and so the question as to whether or not Detroit will be interested in getting into this bidding war, which very clearly exists. They're going to have to compete with Dallas. They're going to have to compete with Vegas, a bunch of teams that have been linked to Andersson in the past. The question is whether or not they'd be willing to shell out the assets to make it work, and if Andersson would be potentially interested in sticking around. He is young enough where I would say any team that acquires him would probably want him to re-sign. But for the Detroit Red Wings, because this is their first year of actually being competitive and making the playoffs and doing some damage in the postseason, I would say that for Detroit, you can't be wasting assets on pure rentals. You have to get guys with the intention of bringing them back. You're not at that cup contending level just yet where you can justify getting guys just for a single playoff run and then letting them go. Especially if it's a guy like Andersson, who's going to cost so much because there are going to be a bunch of other teams going for him. So with all this in mind, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Aside of Justin Faulk of the St. Louis Blues, let me know your thoughts. How do you feel about Connor Murphy of the Chicago Blackhawks, Brett Kulak of the Penguins, and Rasmus Andersson of the Flames? More Red Wings D-man trade targets to sink our teeth into as the trade deadline comes and goes. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.